else that is joining into this meeting. It's the first of its kind, and we are so excited as a Malawian actuarial professionals that we have some renowned actuaries among us, and then the IA is also supporting us. For the sake of others who are joining from Malawi, we have members who are working and they're also actuarial students. And then we also extended the invitation to students at the University of Malawi that are studying actuarial science, which is yet to produce the first graduate of cohorts. So it's still in its infancy. The purpose of this meeting is to help us put in a foundation base for establishment of the Actuarial Society in terms of what we should do in activities and then what the future holds for the society so that we really know what activities we should be undertaking. And I'm particularly glad that the students who are the future custodians of the profession in Malawi are also among us. I'm not really sure if you need introductions or...
We'll do a bit of introduction and we'll give every speaker an opportunity to introduce themselves as well.
Okay, then at this moment, I'd like to hand over to the presenters who are here. And for the sake of everyone joining us, they will introduce themselves. You will get to know them. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Edwin. Yes, I had the pleasure to come to your beautiful country back in 2018, I think. If not 2019, I actually can't remember. It's been quite far. I mean, COVID has created a break in, history and after COVID. But I did have the privilege to come and I visited your workplace there, Edwin. And it's good to see that from the discussion that we had over that lovely dinner, we are seeing what we're seeing before us. With a group of young students and those that are working in this seminar today. And I think the virtual environment, which all of us have had to be very comfortable with, given that it's the only viable tool available for us to continue interacting, it means now we are very comfortable to even have important discussions like these virtually. My name is Rusani Muraudi. I am from the Actuarial Society of South Africa, but I'm coming here as the chair of the Africa Task Force of the International Actuarial Association. So we are tasked with helping to develop the actuarial profession in Africa. So I'm the chair of that committee. And I've been working here in the SADC region mainly, mobilizing the different professions to put a plan in place of how they would grow. And that is the nature of the discussion that I had with your leadership about 2-3 years ago. So we definitely want to see this organization to grow. I first met Edwin, I think in Berlin, if I'm not mistaken. So it's good to see that we've kept in touch and we're busy still, doing what we set out to do back then. So what we have to do, what we were asked to do is we need to come and share a bit about professional development. How does one, navigate their way through the examinations? And then also as an organization, and it's good that we've got the students here as well, so that you can understand that there is the need to build your own local professional organization. So today we'll be sharing with you what that looks like. Why is it important to have an actuarial organization within a country? And what does it take to actually build it? So those are some of the things that we will be sharing with you. I have here with me Michael Tichareva. They are all going to introduce themselves. Michael is originally from Zimbabwe. He has worked in many places, including also the UK, but he has spent majority of his working life in South Africa in different fields, pensions, life. No, I don't think he's worked in life, but banking, but he will do more justice to that and he will explain to you more of what he does now. But one of the roles that he plays for the Actuarial Society of South Africa is that he is our point person in terms of the development of actuarial education on the rest of the continent. The Actuarial Society of South Africa is set out to assist the professional bodies across Africa with the development of their education process, actuarial education process. So Michael is very much involved in that. But Michael has got many interests, and he will be sharing some of those interests with you. Tafazwa, I don't know his CV quite extensively, so he will, I will give him an opportunity to introduce himself. I also have here Mokami as well from Kenya, but she's based in South Africa as well, working at a reinsurer. So she will also introduce herself, but she's one actuary in Africa that we're very proud of. So whenever we have seminars and so on, we always like to have Mokami as part of that, because I think you will look at her, she looks very beautiful. Very young. So when you see her, and Mokami, you will have to switch on your video at some point when you speak so they can see you. Many of you may relate well with her. I think some of us look old, given our beard and everything. So when you look at Mokami, she looks young and so on. And many of you, you know, this profession is not made up of strange people. It's made up of people like you. So that is a role that we want to play here. I'm a health actuary, that's most of what I've done, but these days I do very little of that. And I serve on a couple of boards. I also teach at a university these days and do research at the University of Cape Town. So that's a bit of what I do. And just to give you a sense of what the program will work like, yes, we'll be covering topics related to professional development. The first session will be a discussion focused on that. Mokami is going to do a presentation first, just to give us some background in a format, in a sort of a presentation format. After that, I will be facilitating a discussion, asking the different actuaries here questions for them, which are unprepared questions. But these are leaders, so they will be very happy to take unprepared questions. And then you yourself will have an opportunity also to ask them questions. So we're gonna deal with that. We're gonna wrap that up. And one of the topics that will also include is looking at the threats and opportunities of the actuarial profession. So that's around in terms of professional development. Then we will hand over to Michael and Tafazwa, and they're going to do a bit more of a technical presentation around Ifrs 17 and 9. And so that will be a bit more technical, but I think it will be very useful for you to get that knowledge coming through from them. So this is how we're going to run the day. Hopefully, the aim is to finish at 4. We don't intend to go any longer than that. So without any further ado, we're going to continue. So first up will be Mokami. So when you get to speak for the first time, you know, speakers, you will then introduce yourselves. If you could just mute Philip, you just joined in. If you could just make sure you're muted. So I'm going to hand over to Mokami. She will introduce herself. She'll do a presentation. I think it might be a bit disruptive. Let's rather just do the intros now, and then Mokami will be the last one to do the intro, and then she will get into the program. Michael, please introduce yourself.
Thank you, Lusani, and thanks to all the attendees there in Malawi. We definitely look forward to develop the profession. My name is Michael Tichareva, and I think you're going to hear a lot about me, probably read about me. I don't know, but you will see a lot of me face to face as we work to develop the actuarial profession in Malawi, because it's an area of interest. So I qualified as an actuary in 2004. And for me to reach qualification, so in my introduction my introduction on its own already touches on some of the issues anyway. You know, that's how I normally do it. So in reaching that qualification, I had done an actuarial science degree at the National University of Science and Technology in Bulawayo in Zimbabwe. And then I worked for companies such as Old Mutual in the life assurance. So you were right, Lusani. I did life assurance work, so I understand it. And then I also did pensions work. I worked for companies such as Metropolitan in Cape Town. That was in around 2001. I also worked for a company, the company that you now know as Aon. I worked for it in the UK. It was known, Aon was there, but it was known by a different name, Bacon and Woodrow. Then Bacon and Woodrow merged with another company called Hewitt. It became Bacon and Woodrow Hewitt. Then it merged with Aon. It became Aon Hewitt. Now it's Aon. So I worked for that company. Then in South Africa, I worked for Old Mutual. I also worked for Alexander Forbes. So firstly, I was in life assurance. Then I went into pensions, worked in pensions, South Africa, UK, came back to South Africa, worked in pensions for about a year. Then I moved into a more wider role where I was doing all sorts of work, investments, life assurance, pensions, everything combined, but with Old Mutual. And then I shifted to banking. So I'm kind of a different actuary, has been all over. And now I call myself a banking actuary. I don't want anyone to ever call me a pensions actuary, although I can still do the work if I have to. But I really worked in banking now for about 13 years. So that's where I am. So not to take too long on the introduction side of things, we're going to talk more about it. The point I'm trying to make here is I was just like most of you, just went to university, straight from the bush, straight from the farm, straight from picking, bananas and the like, went to university, did my actuarial degree, then wrote the professional exams, qualified, moved around, changed, practice areas, and as you grow as a professional, which is exactly the path that some of you may end up taking effectively. So that's me as Michael Ticharewa. I will leave it to the next person to introduce themselves.
Fantastic. Tafazo?
Okay, thank you so much, Lusani. So yes, my name is Tafazo Shiduza. My story is not too different from Michael Ticharewa's story or even aspirations, but I'm relatively younger. I qualified as an actuary in 2018, April 2018. So certainly it's been an exciting journey. In most of the qualification route, the actuarial syllabus, we had to change many times along the way as well. But we always then learned a lot from the likes of Michael and Lusani and the other team members who were our seniors as well. So by way of working in studying before qualifying, I also went to the National University of Science and Technology in Zimbabwe. I'm originally from Zimbabwe. Then in terms of working, I do work in South Africa and Zimbabwe at the same time for entities that do cross over. So I worked for a life entity at the start for about two to 3 years. I was working for life entities doing life work and pensions work. But in terms of then progressing from there, I then moved to general insurance. In the healthcare work, I was working for a consultants firm. So when we are working for a consultants firm, you get a bit of exposure where there are many projects around that. So I'm also in enterprise risk management actuary, a SERA certified actuary. So through that, I got to meet the other seniors such as Mr. Ticharewa. It got introduced to other wider areas of working around risk management. This covers banking and wider risk management to do with entities mainly in the financial services sector. So by way of an introduction, that's a bit of my background. So I'm here today hoping to share with other upcoming members here present in terms of what they could also look at. And one of my tasks is to try and also lead through one of the technical or two of the technical discussions around Ifrs 17 and Ifrs 9, and hoping that we could then discuss afterwards. I would say for now, but I would want to end here for now. But if there are any further questions around my personal career growth and everything, I would be be happy to take those. Thank you so much, Lusani. Back to you.
Yes, thank you, Tafazo. Definitely, we'll have plenty of time for them to ask questions related to, your biographies, etc. So that's fantastic. Mokami, over to you. You can introduce yourself and then kick us off with your presentation. Thank you.
Thanks, Lusani, and hi, everybody. I hope you can hear me clearly. I think I mentioned to Lusani earlier, my Wi-Fi connection wasn't so good today.
Yes, so Mokami is in a public place, so excuse a bit of the background noise. She's still committed to take us through this. Are you able to share the screen, Mokami?
Yes, I'll try after my introduction. Yeah,
all
so
right.
so Mokami Njeri is my name. Also a qualified actuary and also a SIRA. Glad to hear all the SIRAs in the room. And I think even when I read your president's interview, he did mention that he's a qualified SIRA, which I actually find the most enjoyable part of the actuarial profession. So it's probably the only exam I didn't mind doing. So I'm currently working in reinsurance with Swiss Re, based in Cape Town, as Lusani mentioned. I work in the life and health sub-Saharan African team as a senior client manager, mainly focused on East and West Africa, but also doing a bit of Southern African work. And previously to that, I have been in consulting, both life and non-life, and also in direct insurance for a group company in Kenya. And I'm very pleased to interact with you over this session today. I also wear many hats, so I'm definitely part of TASK, which is the Actuarial Society of Kenya. And recently, well, not so recently now, because we've had other elections, joined the Council of the Institute and Faculty of Actuaries. So really happy to be able to represent the African continent in that way. And yeah, looking forward to the session today. I see a hand raised. I don't know if that's for me or not, but okay, it's going down, so I'll assume it was not correct.
Questions will be taken later. So for now, you can take us into your presentation. Just confirm whether you are able to share it.
So it's okay, Lusani, I just have to talk through it because I can see my host participation is disabled. My sharing is disabled because I'm a host for now.
Okay, we'll
That's
try
what
to
I
correct
see.
that. Carla, if you could give her sharing rights. I think there's
Yes, it should happen now.
You have it now.
So my session is on the topic of professional development, society objectives and activities. Just give me 1 minute. Let me try again. Okay. Thanks, Carla.
I wanted to comment that some of you have South African names. I'm saying Tandi, Tando. I'm like, that's interesting.
Intermarriages in Africa. Don't you understand that?
No, they had run away from Chakazulu from the war and come to Malawi. There used to be a war. Most of these are originally from South.
Sorry, do you see the presentation or do you see the presentation only?
Yes, we can.
Yes.
Okay. Great. So congratulations on setting up the Actuarial Society of Malawi, I think 2 years ago. So as I mentioned, I am from Kenya originally, and we set up the Actuarial Society of Kenya. Okay, it was set up in 1993. So it's a couple of years old, but it's really been exponentially active in the last 10 years. So I know it's something that the IAA and especially the IAA Africa Committee has asked us to be able to share with other emerging societies. So I'm really happy to be able to share that with you in terms of what I think is most important. Yeah, so I'll maybe speak for 10 to 15 minutes about what I can say are the main items for yourselves to think about. So I want to talk about the point of starting well and building something that lasts. So a lot of times you can be, I don't know if it happens in your country, if something is being built by, I don't know, someone from Germany, we know it's going to be effective and you can count on the workmanship. But then when it's an African contractor, we have question marks on it. So I think a lot of times we can be ashamed to say that we trust the workmanship for certain countries more than others. But I firmly believe that the robustness of the actual training and skill set with a high probability results in a consistent application and experience across jurisdictions. And that's one of the reasons I'm very passionate about the profession. So I actually believe we can set up actuarial societies that are, at par with global standards, at par with the IFOA, the SOA, and so on. So I just really want to encourage you to build the right foundation. And I think in our cultures, a lot of times people like to take shortcuts and, yeah, perhaps, just sort of do something that is maybe a bit like just on the surface. But I think what we've learned from Task is that taking the time to actually build the right constitution, no matter how long it takes, taking the time to decide to interact with regulators and go ahead to create an actuaries act so that we can be legislated in society, taking time to actually wait for the qualified actuaries to be trained within the country, providing a structure for them for people to be sponsored so that you can have ingrown actuaries. It's been something that's taken time. So I think that's why it was important to tell you the Actuarial Society started in 1993, but it's really in the last 10 years that we've seen it like blossoming, but it's because the right foundation was set, right? So I think that for me is maybe one of the key items, and to just say that yeah, that is something that I would encourage you to do, and not to try to get there too fast, and just take the time it takes, and so on. Okay, sorry, there's somebody sneezing. The second point I want to make is about seeking first to understand and then to be understood. So I know a lot of you might be students, but I know some of us have worked in an actuarial setting, whether we are analysts or associates supporting other actuaries. And what I find a lot of times is that actuaries work in a bubble and in a model, right? And it's sometimes this mysterious box, and it's easy to get caught up in it and forget that the box needs to fit into the real world. So from where I sit, the actual skill set is incomplete without the actual and human connection to the stakeholders it serves. So stakeholder management and engagement is key for the actual role and profession, both in the input and output process. A lot of actuaries have been accused of sitting in an ivory tower where we are not cognizant of what goes on in the real world, where we assume that we know how to set the assumptions just because we look at some statistics, and we lack the depth of knowledge as someone who actually does the actual work, like for example, who processes a death claim. So actuaries will sit and look at number of deaths in a year and assume they can, know so much about the process, and they haven't even tried to walk in the shoes of the process it took to verify the claim and make it come into their statistics, right? So if we don't seek to understand and indeed empathize with the processes that we model, then we miss a lot. So if we translate this to what the Actuarial Society of Malawi is trying to do as it sets up, stakeholder management will be key. So as I said, the actuarial profession in the country cannot exist in a bubble. It needs to be supported by other parties. They need to be supported by the industry. It needs to be supported by the regulators. It even needs to be supported by the policyholders, and consumers. And I know at the stage the profession is in the country, I'm sure most people's parents probably are like mine, where I had to convince them what actuarial science is and to convince them to pay for my qualification, right? But at the same time, we actually cannot develop faster than them, right? We actually have to make sure that we are engaging with them. And likewise, if we give our outputs and we don't seek to understand how they will be used and how the decisions that rely on them will be made, as well as understanding other macro factors, then our analysis or our profession is incomplete. And worse yet, we take the risk that our advice is correct in a factual sense, but is misused or even disregarded at times, uh, to someone's detriment, to society's detriment. So I think for me, the main thing just to say is that as you set up the Actuarial Society, as you train as actuaries, make sure you don't get so into the actuarial box or the actuarial profession that you forget the world around it, right? The world that it supports or the world that supports it, both from an input and output perspective. And I think if you have that in mind as you set up the actuarial profession, then it will be built to last, because you will grow and develop alongside the profession. I mean, the industry, I beg your pardon. So I know right now actuaries are probably using life insurance and pensions, but I'm glad to hear there's somebody in banking, right? So you want to be one step ahead, but you want to grow with the industry and make sure that you're consistent and you're not running ahead of them. I know for us, for example, the actual profession was really supported by the fact that the regulator decided that all insurance companies must have an actuary. So even before we had the supply side, the demand was already there. And that was really amazing, to be honest, in terms of helping our profession to grow. Right. Then the other point here is to rely on the support of the international or regional bodies. So when I look up Malawi, just on Google, it says it's in southeastern Africa. So Lusani, we can decide that the support must be shared or given from both ends. So my background is actually, I don't know if you can see, it says Actuarial Academy of East Africa, and it's an initiative that we set up as a council of task to really support the development of the actuarial profession, because even Kenya, even at the surrounding countries, we were privileged to be now at 65 or 70 actuaries. But at the same time, we see that the other countries around in our region haven't grown to the same capacity. So the actual Academy of East Africa is just created to center around support on mentorship, on training for exams, and also on university support. So these are key pillars we see as necessary to support the development of the actual profession. I know mentorship is one of the things the Actuarial Society of Malawi has identified. So what we have is that we have mentorship programs where we link up qualified actuaries to actuaries in training, and I think it can even be extended further from a society perspective. And then we have the training pillar where we offer tutorials for free. I don't know how long they'll be for free, but for a really small fee for the higher level exams, because we saw students really struggling with that. I know ASA offers tutorials as well, but I think they're paid as well. They're paid up. And then we also have this pillar called university support, which we know is quite important, because the quality of students coming from our local universities and the quality of the degree is something that we also want to ensure is relevant for our profession. So it was set up in 2018, still a baby, but it's one of the initiatives we set up just to be able to also provide support. So wanting to encourage you to continue to reach out to ASA, to IAA, to IFOA, and even to TASC, right? As you continue to develop the profession. And then, then again, I think, as I've said, the issue of developing alongside the industry, I think um, the need for the industry, which has not yet been exposed to actuaries, to see what actuaries do and to appreciate it, is a really big step. So for us, we've had actuaries who've worked on government projects, who've sort of done different consulting projects, and then the value of the actual skill set, once it's seen, can then be propagated and taken further. So I think I just want to encourage you and I know Lusani talks a lot about actuaries in the public domain. And I think that's something that even as you start to develop, you want to make sure that you're strategically positioning actuaries or even training actuaries in the right place. And I would say the regulator is the right place to start, depending on how strong your relationship is and how strong their influence is. But as well, obviously, the insurance industry and the Insurance Industry Association would also be a key partner. So, Lusani, those are my my nuggets for now, but obviously I know we wanted this to be more of a deliberation and discussion. So thank you for
Oh,
that.
definitely. Thank you very much. Yes, this is definitely a discussion. So, Michael, I think you should come in, weigh in on this, take us forward, and then Tafazo will want to hear your thoughts on this as well.
Yeah, so thanks, Mukami, for for all these insights. I think they are quite good insights. The issue of developing an association is quite a big issue and an important one. So I'm going to touch on a few things in support of what Mukami said, and also in addition. So one important thing is the association can only exist because of its people, right? And the people are you. You are the custodians of the profession if you decide that this is the profession you want to follow, which means that you need to have dedicated and committed people who drive it forward. And that takes me to the governance structures. So when you have your association, just try and have a good governance structure, which I suppose you already have, and that governance structure would obviously have different role players, president, whoever. And they need to have a real interest in seeing what needs to be done and driving the things that need to be done. So when we move from the governance, you come to the activities. So you need to think about the activities that you need to be implementing. So for example, Mukami was talking about, supporting others, mentoring, helping the other students go through the exam system, because it can be challenging, the exam system. So you need to think about activities, which means you might end up forming, committees of 2 or 3 people who drive a particular activity. You might call it education or any other name, depending on the requirements within your country. So move from governance, then we come to activities. Those activities can be done in various ways. Right now, this is one of them. We are in a session, we are discussing, and so it could be activities that are technical or just professional, where you're teaching professional issues, whatever it is, and that's directly to your members. Now, if we move from there, let's look at a community of actuarial practicing people. You would have undergraduates, which are students at university. Then you're going to have postgraduate students, those who have now graduated. That's another section of the people you will find. Then you're going to have the industry. So mostly the postgraduate people will be working with the industry. And the industry, we are talking of the companies that would ordinarily need to use the skills of actuaries, in all the practice areas. And I'm sure you are aware of the practice areas: pensions, life assurance, general insurance, short-term insurance, healthcare, investments. And for us in South Africa, we really talk of banking as an actual main practice area. Then you can have other wider fields where people can operate in. So that's your industry. So your activities sometimes need to be bringing together industry players into sessional meetings or seminars or conferences, raising awareness of what actuaries can do, are doing, and what value they add. Then the last one I normally touch on is the regulator. And Mukami touched on the regulator as well. You need to be in touch with the regulations that are happening. If there are changes in regulations, you probably want to be issuing some comments or giving some input so that you can influence the direction of the regulations using the skills you have. So these things, when we say there's an association, if these things are happening within that community of actuaries, then we can know that the association is actually functioning. And we're seeing students passing exams through help from the association. We can say the association is actually functioning. So in the main, the association is really you as the people doing what needs to be done. And that's what we have seen. You can drill it down. Actuarial Society of South Africa here has different practice area committees, for example, which is a committee of people practicing in each particular field. And they are the people who drive the activities of the Actuarial Society of South Africa, which ordinarily should be the same with the Actuarial Society of Malawi, that there could be interest groups like that who then drive initiatives in that particular area as you grow your profession. So when we combine all of this with what Mukami has spoken about, that is what makes up an association. These are the things you need to be looking to. Yes, it's not a walk in the park. There are no miracle moments. It's a favorite statement I normally say. It's one step at a time, but you need to be doing those things. And most importantly, this is where you draw in from the experience of the people around you, which is your regional associations and international associations that have walked through the same path that are at a more advanced stage, to be helping and to be giving their own views and their expertise in how you can do certain things. And with time, you will start having your own qualified actuaries, because I understand there is no qualified actuary yet in Malawi. But look at Kenya, you probably have, I don't know, 70, or like Mukami said. Look at Zimbabwe. Zimbabwe, we can't even count now. We don't know, because we think it's 100 something actuaries who have now qualified or gone through the profession, and probably up to 500 people who have actually an actuarial qualification or have gone or are still part of the profession. And in South Africa, we have got just more than 1,000 actuaries, you know, obviously still trying to increase the number of Black actuaries. But all of that happens as a result of the support that is around us. And that is what makes up an association. Honestly, it's like a family. There is a father and mother, and then there are these kids coming, and then you have got other extended family members. All of these people give input to make a family, to make it what it is. These are the aspects I wanted to touch at this stage. Thank you, Lusani.
Fantastic. I hope you don't think I'm the father in the All right. A lot of good points that have been raised here. And I think one crucial issue that I thought I should just mention before asking Tafadzo to come in is you obviously understanding where you are at the moment, your context. That Correct. Context is the fact that you do not yet have qualified actuaries, which means that becomes the primary goal, I would think, to change that situation. And I know that Edwin is working on it, and you are also working on it because this is what you're studying at university. And yes, there are obstacles. And we're going to talk about that, will be the next question, but we're just going to exhaust this now. But we're going to focus a bit more on the examinations and the going through those exams, the challenges around education, and how can we make sure that as many of you as possible make it through the examination system and eventually qualify. So we're going to touch on that. So it's important for us to really be in touch with what's more important now. But obviously the other things also do come into play, but you know, you will guide us as well. We want to hear from you as well in terms of what are some of the key issues that you're facing now. Tafadzo, come in, let's hear your perspective.
Okay, thank you so much. Thank you so much. I don't have a lot to add. I think Mike and the other team members have already covered quite a number of topics there. I just wanted to illustrate, just picking on a point mentioned earlier, to say, you know, one classical case that comes to mind quickly when it comes to a society is that of Zimbabwe. It has had its own fair of challenges. And we are, as a society, got a lot of assistance from other regional societies, mainly from South Africa. I remember when it got resuscitated, it used to exist as a society, but it died down, and then, loss of interest along the way, just as a practical example. But when it came back, it came back stronger, because we had I'm sure for its first convention, the likes of Michael Shario actually came through and made it happen. from South Africa, people had to reach out to them, and even the convention itself, it's organizing and everything yet to be, we had to be handheld by the South African counterparts. So, I mean, there is abundance of help out there and assistance, even when you want presenters, even when you want to have more sessions of this kind. It's sort of easier to arrange now. You could always learn from those other professions that are now quite a bit more mature and advanced when it comes to that. Then the other point to also expand on as well is to look more to other professions within the country. If you are looking at your accounting profession, the chartered accountants, for example, we are now looking at, coming in of different Ifrs standards that are quite asking us to work more with other professions, especially the accounting profession. So you sort of want to also, learn as much as possible from them if they've developed to a certain extent, if they've got certain guidelines in place. It's always a good place to start as well, and it sort of pushes the brand faster, and it sort of pushes for recognition as soon as possible. I think at this point I may want to end there, then we could always discuss further on other aspects. Thank you, Lusani.
Yeah. Fantastic. Yes, I've just indicated there you can already start putting your questions there on the chat if you prefer to ask via that medium. But we'll also give you an opportunity to ask questions, to put up your hand and to ask questions. I think we are actually in that stage now where, if you do put up your hand, we'll take your question. But I'll keep the conversation going. I want us to focus on exams now. I think all of us have some kind of a relationship with the examination process. Whether it's a good relationship or it's a bad relationship, that's something that we want to hear. I know that I had, a bad relationship with some of the subjects, and I did them too many times. I'm very embarrassed to say how many times I did some of them, but I almost finished the one hand and I was going into the other hand. And eventually then I made it. But other than that, it was not such a bad journey. It was fairly scenic one. So I did take my time. From my first year, 2001, my first year at university, until I qualified, my last exam that I passed was in 2011. So that's a bit of time that it took me. I started working during that time as well. But yeah, there were definitely some challenges that I came across on this path. Yes, there have been a lot of syllabus changes, as Tafazo mentioned. I started off, I wrote most of my exams with the Institute before the Actuarial Society of South Africa's education system was introduced around 2010. So that was towards the end of my studies. So I think there's only one subject that I did, which was only through the Actuarial Society of South Africa, but then I don't keep both designations. I only keep the one because of the MRA, the Mutual Recognition Agreement. So yeah, I want us to talk about our experience. I know some of you qualified when you were very young. 2004, Mike, that makes you were probably still quite a teenager when you qualified in 2004. So please tell us about your journey, your exam journey.
No, I was old, man. I was old, remember? So, so I think to everyone here, one thing about actuarial exams is don't be afraid of them. Trust me, almost every actuary, except a few, and I will say except a few outliers, would have failed exams. These exams, you fail them. Sometimes this is where you learn what failure means. Because some of you are high flyers, you come from high school and you're just used to be passing and topping the class. Actuarial science will teach you that, well, sometimes that's not the case. So, Lusani, if I tell my story in a very short space of time, I went to university and I wanted to be in banking, but when I went to university, National University of Science and Technology, that was in 1995. And I wanted to there wasn't actuarial science. And I went into a finance class. at the end of that first year, I was doing BCom. It was a BCom in finance. And at the end of that first year, well, to my surprise, I passed, and I was the best student in that class. And then there was an announcement that actuarial science is going to be introduced. I had no clue. Internet was nowhere to be seen. You could not go and Google and say, what is actuarial science? But I still stayed. I want to do this thing. Okay, some discouraged me, but I still was accepted.
And
when
what year was this? Was this 1970 or was
95, first year. Yeah, so 95 in August. So I want to look, I want to tell this story because that's the story of exams, right? So when I went into my second year, because it was a BCom program, they introduced BCom Actuarial Science, which means the first year subjects still counted, okay, towards the actuarial science, because you'd have done corporate finance and accounting, which are two of the subjects that are needed for actuarial science, right? And the other stuff we had done, marketing, what management, communication, all that stuff. When I went into that class, I was probably one of the worst students because just the notation, right? The notation itself was confusing me. Having an A with some dots and there's this what is it? I don't know. Something where you put N under and all those things, and I'm looking at this, I'm like, okay, what does it mean? So I spend a lot of time trying to understand when I see this, what does it mean? Then the statements themselves, the problem statements, if it's a question and you are asked to translate it into an equation of value. Most of you are talking about equation of value. No, just translate what the statement into an equation of value and come up with an answer that makes sense, that answers a problem. That was a challenge, right? So I went through that whole year and we were doing survival models, which is the life assurance program, and compound interest is one of them, and then statistics one. Yeah, I was struggling, trust me. But there's one thing I did 3 weeks before the exam. And when I thought I was struggling, I also realized actually I wasn't alone. Everybody is struggling. So at least comfort started coming back. I did one thing, and that is the thing I did throughout until I qualified. 3 weeks before the exam, one guy in my class got a paper, 2 papers. He brought them. He said, Mike, I've managed to get paper from the Institute of Actuaries. I said, okay, let's go and sit. I said, but you don't have answers. How are we going to know? And he just said, no, but let's go and sit these papers. And I said, okay, if we are to sit the paper, let's sit them under exam conditions. We went, closed the doors, we wrote the exam. We came out and we started comparing our answers. And you could feel that there is something wrong. So I think the first attempt, I got about 37%. He got about 35%, but we were now comparing. So we worked out the answers and we tried to understand what was being said, looking at the books. And what I'm saying now is something you can apply even yourself, right? On our own without answers. Then we said, now we think we understand the answers. For both papers, we took a break, right? We came back and wrote exactly the same paper under exam conditions, right? Trust me, we still saw fire. Same paper that we had discussed and everything because we didn't have answers. So we saw fire again. But now we had improved. We're now in the 60%, 68%. And then we sat again with my friend. He's now the head of Department of Actuarial Science at National University of Technology. And we looked at this paper and we started again checking until we were 100% with the answers. 100% now. We now knew that now these are the correct answers. For me, we did twice and we discussed and we went to the exam. When I saw the exam, it was not the exact questions, but it was similar questions. It was always similar for both papers. And we wrote the exam and you know what? I passed. And at the end of the day, together with other subjects, remember I'm talking only the actuarial components. The second year, at the end of, I also then became best student in that, simply because of that process. And I went on attachment, came back. When I came back, I never struggled with the actuarial exam again. I applied exactly the same approach. We were now doing papers under exam conditions and then sit down to understand why did I get it wrong? What do they mean? What exactly were they trying to say? So I was now applying that towards exams, like the last month of exam, I would always do under exam conditions, the paper. It doesn't matter if I write it twice, the same paper, I'll do that. Now, this time we've got the benefit of having the answers. Then we just got papers, no answers. We didn't know, we were just doing it. So I guess what I'm saying is, it's an approach you can use. It has been proven, it works, but it gets you to understand. And when you are even revising that paper, you're trying to look at how else can it come different? This is one question, but how else can it come different? It could be an increasing annuity. It can be a reducing annuity, but this was a level annuity. So how can I actually put up an equation of value that makes sense, right? So that's one thing I did. And then after passing with that exam, we got 5 exemptions out of 8. Obviously, corporate financial account was 1. Obviously, we had distinctions all the time because that's the easiest. I mean, that's easy stuff. The actuarial ones, only the other 3. And then because of the 3, the exam system was changing. That was in 1999 when I graduated. It was a 4-year program, effectively 3 years because the other year was industrial attachment. So I look at this, I'm like, okay, I have to write 3 subjects because the exam is changing. If it changes, they were introducing stochastic processes and queuing theory, whatever they call it, stochastic processes. And I didn't like that subject because I was not the guy for, you know, the theory, mathematical deep stuff. So I set the 3 subjects in, was it October or September, those exams, 3, which means there was pressure after graduating. You know, I started working in June and then I must write these 3 subjects. But because it was really a repeat, because you've done this stuff at university, I got the 3 subjects, which means I completed my first level of exam. Then, because we had also done investments and general insurance, and we were the first students to do actuarial science, like I said, we had already read investments. So I was now going to write investments. I read again, which was next April 2000. I passed the investments. You know what? We were given vehicles. When you pass investments, you get a company car. And I passed and got a company car. That was even more motivation, right? Money on top, company car. I said, no, you know, I'm looking around and I'm like a 24-year-old now driving a company car, you know, moving around in our locations. And I was like, okay, that gave me even more to study. So I then continued now studying, and obviously I became over ambitious. That's when I started taking a subject I was not supposed to take, and then you fail it, you know. But in the main, I maintained exactly that approach I got in my second year. I maintained that approach. I would only fail a subject, the next time I would pass it. I fail a subject, and then Lusani, don't want to say how many times you failed, but I can tell you I failed fellowship, I think 3 times. Because the first time I attempted it, thinking I was ready, I wasn't. I had only done 2 of the 4 subjects required, and then I attempted fellowship. I was really way below par, so I failed that. Then the other 2 times I was in the UK, lots of things, deep stuff. Then I passed it the 4th time. Then there was this communication paper that gave me fire. You know, growing up on a farm, I could not write English, but still I wrote it, I think about 5 times. I passed it the 6th time. So those are the 2 subjects that gave me trouble, real trouble. The others I would pass first time. I think life, I passed it. Life assurance, I passed it 2nd time. General insurance, I passed it 1st time. So that was the way, but I used an approach. So what I'm trying to say, and I qualified in 2004. So 99 graduation, 2004 I qualified. What I'm trying to say is find a way. There is usually a comfortable way for you to do these things. I'm not saying what I did is what you should do. I'm just saying, but it works for most people. It has worked for most, but find a way that you can become comfortable. Because for me, I became comfortable with an approach where if you fail an exam and you start crying and complaining, not knowing why you failed, you have a big problem. That's the mentality I developed. You must know when you fail, why you failed, because that helps you fix the problem. So that's an element from my side. That was my journey, which was quite exciting and interesting, because when you pass, there was always this additional money that comes, you know. And this vehicle I'm talking about, getting a car at that age, I didn't have a license, you know. Results came on Thursday, Friday. Then on Tuesday, I went to get for my driver's license because I'd also failed my driving about 3 times. So I went Then I came back with the license, you know, and then my car was delivered that same week. So it was quite, you know, these things. So you bring a whole lot of aspects into it, you know, when you're studying actuarial. Make it fun for you. And one thing, do not just be a bookworm. Yes, you have to work hard. It requires you to be disciplined, but don't lose life. Have life. If you go to church, go watch soccer, whatever it is, you know, take time out, because as I grew up, I started realizing that stress manifests in different ways, and you may not see it, and it affects how you study. It affects your assimilation, what do you call it? Propensity to assimilate information. You may not see it, but it does, because you need that time out. So these are some of the things. You know what, I also am a teacher. I teach fellowship pensions and investments in banking. There are a lot of other exam tips. We may cover them if we have time, but right now I'm gonna yield to my colleagues on the panel. But these are things we can cover at some point, or maybe a completely separate session, which I'm going to deliver to the to you guys there. I mean, Edwin, you must arrange that session. We'll talk about just exam techniques and how to study and the like. But thank you, Lusani.
Yeah, thanks, Mike. Yes, I acknowledge the questions from Augustine and Spec here, but let me just hear from Mukami about her journey. You can keep it fairly short, 2 or so minutes, and then Fazo as well, so that they can just get, maybe you guys have you had a different approach, and it can be quite helpful here. So let's hear from you, Mukami.
Thanks, Basani, and thanks, Michael, for sharing all those nuggets. Takes me back. I qualified in 2012. So for me, it was an interesting journey, and I think I really agree with a lot of the points that Michael has shared. That a lot of actuaries are used to, finding math and life easy, but the actuarial exams teach you to be humble, right? Because then you really can't get away from that. So I think for me, it's maybe two things to add, and I think sort of Michael mentioned it. But if I look back at my journey, I don't think I would have been able to qualify without the group of friends or people I was studying with. So I never see myself as a product of just my own efforts, their support, and even my family's support to be able to let you lock yourself out for 3 hours every day. Even your social life and dating can definitely be affected by the exams. You can only date actuaries because they're the ones who can understand what kind of life you're living, right? So I would say, just to take care of your, I guess, your support system, and make sure that that is there, and it's set up for the long term, including people you can study with, discuss with, go through those challenges with. And I know sometimes the challenge, especially in a young society, that there are not too many people doing each exam. But I would really encourage you to find a group which you can go on the journey with, or one or two people. Then I think for me, again, back to what I said, because what I like about the actual profession is that it's a global standard. So one of the things that used to keep us motivated or even push us to study a bit more is because you're going to be benchmarked against. We used to be very scared of the Asians, the Chinese and the Indians, because they work 7 days a week, and they're obviously very good in math. So I think just to go above and beyond what is needed, I think that would be my maybe secret nugget, because I think at some of the exams we do in university, it's like you can sort of try to study smart, decide, oh, I'm going to pick this and not the other. But I found that approach very difficult in actuarial exams. It's almost that you just have to, be thorough, and I don't think there's like a shortcut to preparing well. And as I said, just going a step further than what you think you need to go, just so that you can ascertain yourself that you gave it your best, right? I'm not saying you'll pass every time, but just to have that peace of mind that you actually gave it your best shot. Yeah. So thanks, Sunny.
Thanks, Mukami. Tafazo, what something for you?
Okay, yes, thank you so much. Mine would be quick, just adding on the experiences shared already. I think one struggle I also had, at the start, I was kind of too ambitious. You register for quite a number of subjects, too much that you can actually possibly handle, and you only realize it, close to the examination that I've sort of taken on too much. So my advice there is to say. Sometimes it's better to register for 1 or 2 examinations per session. Not only is it quite efficient in terms of managing your resources, it also allows you to focus, and it sort of helps with that process. I understand, yes, there could be high flyers out there. Someone could, I know a person who registered for 6 exams and they passed all of them, but you may need to gauge, yes, when it comes to that, and really, really be careful around that. Otherwise, the falling could be harder if you don't manage it well. And then the other advice I really, encourage is to have as many study groups as possible. With Actuarial, it's more about collaboration, like what has already been said, to say you are benchmarked against a whole lot of other students from other regions. You need to make sure with your colleagues, you try to help each other as much as possible. It's about crossing the line. It's no longer about who gets the highest mark. It's about passing. So you need to help each other, and if possible, arrange for tutorials. Yes, I understand that in Malawi, maybe there are no local actuaries as yet, but you could get a lot of regional help from other actuaries, from ANSA, from Kenya, from us. There are others who are really willing to help facilitate for 1 or 2 tutorials to take students through some of the tough subjects. For example, your CP1 that could be lengthy, you could sort of arrange for that. You have a group of students, give them, get some sort of high level advice around that. Because I recall I had a challenge transitioning from those mathematical subjects to those higher order subjects. We never had any advice around that. So it could be a nightmare. I remember I failed CP1, former C1 about 3 times before I then passed it. And for me to pass it, I just had to sit down with a few seasoned actuaries who then, gave me life-changing tips. So sometimes you need to ask around. I think that's all in addition to what has been shared. Thank you, Lusani.
That is fantastic. I'm just going to have a look at some of the questions here. Spec made a comment here about the difficulty of writing mathematics in Word. And this has more to do with the impact of COVID in the virtual environment and examinations having to be done through this medium. That adds another complexity. It's obviously not a challenge that we have experienced firsthand as students, but it's a challenge that we encounter as teachers, as lecturers. And there are various ways of going around that. So in our university, we allow students to write as they would and scan that and send it through so that we avoid this thing about the mathematics in Word. But I know that there's more focus and training around that that has to happen going forward. So that students are able to complete their assignments without having to write with on paper and scan, etc. So that is something there. The second question here from Augustine, being a young society, how can we rope in support from the industry as a long-term partner? What are some of the activities that would result in good partnership with the industry? And what should our value proposition be to industry? What kind of support should the industry offer ideally? And I'm going to ask Michael to respond on that one. And before he does that, I'll just mention the one key aspect with which the industry can support is to support you in your studies, to support you financially, to take the exams, and to give you the time to study. Now, it appears that, I think Edwin mentioned, the regulator, the bank, they did that. I mean, he's here today because that was offered at a point in time. So that is absolutely crucial. If you're gonna have, if the country is gonna produce any locally based actuaries, there would need to be that type of investment from industry. So that is one aspect with which they can invest, but there are obviously many other things that they can contribute even beyond just the examinations. Michael, do you want to add a couple of pointers on that?
Yeah, okay. So look, look, this is an interesting question, but remember when I opened up, I said the association is just a name, but it's about the people. So ordinarily, you as actuarial professions actually work in the industry. So you are the industry. Okay, that's a very important point. So you are the industry, being also an employee. So typically, like Lusani just said, companies in most cases are the ones that pay for your exam, and companies would provide you with study leave. Companies would do all sorts of things. Companies could also sponsor, anything that is to do with things that bring value to the people who work there, like it could be small research or whatever it is. But how can you do that if we look at your questions here? Now, the industry might be run by, your CEO might be an engineer or a chartered accountant or someone in another profession. So the starting point is making sure that where you are working, you are actually showcasing the value an actuary brings. And obviously it depends on the company. Remember, if it's insurance, definitely there's actuarial staff. You can't run away from it. In banks now, we know that there's actuarial staff. In investments, you know that you can also place an actuary, there is actuarial staff. In healthcare. So you need now to showcase you at an individual level. How many are we here? We are about 38 people, assuming you're all scattered around, employed by different companies. You need to play a role to promote what you actually do. If you look at what is being done, and if you see that if I can apply actuarial skills and actually show my colleagues, the leaders of a company who may not be actuaries, and you can't force them to understand actuarial work if you actually don't showcase it. So when you do that, it means when you're now talking today, like we're going to talk about Ifrs 17, when you now start talking about it, how it affects the company, how you as an actuary or actuarial profession can bring value to that, they will start to see value in this. They will start to sponsor a seminar, for example, a seminar being run by actuaries. They will start to open up. They will start to put a budget, an annual budget. They'll start to put a number and say, you know what? Let's support these guys. Let's put 5,000 US. Let's put 10,000 US within the company. So this question is hugely important, but it's driven by you as actuarial professionals coming together and making sure you're making an impact in those companies and making the leadership of those companies actually understand. Now, beyond the actual companies, because they are the sponsors of the profession, we all exist because of these companies and their need for our services. Beyond that is the regulator. Develop a very important relationship with the regulator, because what happens at the regulator level also dictates what is likely to happen in the industry, how the companies are likely to behave. So if a regulator now understands the value of actuaries and they end up saying, you know what, like it happened here in South Africa, introducing Basel II, this international banking regulation, and then models had to be created. And the regulator, because he understood actuaries, and I think, I don't know if that was the time when Jill Marcus, Lusani Jill Marcus, I think was the governor of the Reserve Bank, was an honorary actuary, having been given that, and said, your models must be checked by actuaries. Don't bring us your models, try and bring actuaries to check your models. That was banking models. Actuaries were not necessarily known in banking, but because the regulator knew the work of actuaries in other areas like insurance, insisted that we want this to be looked by actuaries. So if you don't know what an actuary is and you're a leader or a manager in a company, you start to ask and say, oh, okay, what have you got? Who are these guys? What can you guys do? And then the work you do start showcasing the value you can provide to the company. Because remember, they are there to make a profit. They are there to provide a solution to a problem, and they are there to fix it the most efficient way possible. And if it's actuarial techniques that can do that, combined with other professionals, then showcase. So it's a long journey to partner with the industry, but it's driven by us as professionals in our own little way at individual level or as a group. We need to do stuff. They can put money, they can give you study leave, They can give you a whole lot of things, but make them understand. That's what I can add to that, Lusan.
Fantastic. So it's approaching 15:15. I want us to wrap up this topic at 15:15 so that we can move on to the Ifrs 17 and 9 and still allow you some questions towards the end of that. There is also a question here: is doing a master's degree in actuarial science worthwhile? It's a yes and no from my perspective. It's a yes in a sense that in some of the universities, it gives you an opportunity to do more of the higher order thinking type subjects, which may lead you to qualifying sooner than later. But it's also a no in a sense that with a master's degree, depending on which university, you may be required to do some research, which may not be necessary for you to qualify as an actuary. But we are finding more and more that, in order to influence or to break new ground, you do need a number of people who are doing research. So you do need some good research happening. So those people who have done master's degrees typically better at doing research and therefore very useful for a profession that is ambitious and wants to be involved in many other areas. And that is definitely what the Actuarial Society is about. We want to see ourselves as a global leader in context-based solutions. So that requires really going and interacting with new contexts. And research is very useful in doing that. So the answer there is yes, but it's also no, depending on what it is that you want to achieve and what's available for you. Yes, we're going to wrap up here. The one last sort of comment I would want to just get you guys to make. I didn't see any hands here, but we will allow, there will be 15 minutes. Am I seeing some hands? Let's just see.
Edwin.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, okay, I had a lot of questions, but I'll try to summarize them. Okay. My first one is just a comment. Thank you, Michael. I think for what you have shared as your story towards, in terms of the exams and how successful you were at the end. And what you have pointed out is that we can hold another meeting just to talk about exams. I'll take up that. I'll remind you. That one for sure.
No choice. Definitely.
Yes.
You have no choice.
Yes. And I also want to thank you, Michael, for having brought it up that you are the first actuarial science student cohort. And it's the same thing that we have at the University of Malawi, the students who have joined us. And I hope what they have held is a motivation to them, although I doubt if there will be a guy if they pass the investments exams. But I think it's something that they look forward to. Mukemi, thank you for introducing to us how the task came about to be and all the challenges that you overcome. One point that you mentioned is that we need to be patient, more especially in terms of making sure we have qualified actuaries. Anyway, let me just say I'm also a qualified actuary at the associate level. I'm stuck with the 2 exams for the past 2 years, where I also need assistance. I'm remaining with 2 exams. But my question is, when you said that we should wait for actuaries to be qualified before our society becomes fully fledged, I just want to understand what you really meant. And also coming from the Actuarial Academy that you set up in Kenya, I just want to find out how we can go about to tap in the mentorship or the free tutorial that you are offering from Malawi. So you may guide us on the process of how we can happen. As I told you, all of us in the industry here are students. No one is finished with the exams. For the time being, I think those are my questions. But
the questions, let's take those questions. Questions. Yeah. Let's start with you. You want to go, Michael or Mukami?
Yeah, I can go. Thanks, Edwin. And I think just one thing to say, I know at the IFOA there's been this drive to even change the name of associate to chartered actuary. So I think the difference between associate and fellow is just a specialization. So I think even in the SOA, associate is actually considered, an actuary as well. So I think maybe just to say that first. But I think what I meant in terms of having qualified actuaries to drive the industry is because one or two things. The IAA will only, I think, consider you a full member, right? I think once you at least have some qualified actuaries, if I'm not wrong. And then also, if the drive is towards qualification, the level of engagement you can you can have with the industry is a bit reduced. And that's because if you think about the fact that all your probably actuarial work right now is being outsourced to actuaries maybe from overseas, right? So the position of influence on the industry will be stronger once those services are coming from inside the country or local actuaries. Just as Michael has said, you showcase your actual skills to the industry, and then that helps the society to grow. Because whilst people are studying, and as I said, even for the Actuarial Society of Kenya, the industry helped us to go through this process of qualifying. But at that point, the society wasn't so strong because to have time to study and do everything else in terms of building the society will be challenging. And of course, there's also the item of just getting that experience and mentorship from qualified actuaries. Things like building your disciplinary program, right? In terms of the code of conduct for actuaries, there are a lot of elements and pillars that would require maybe additional time in addition to this time required for studying. So I think it might be a tall order to try to focus on both. If most of the actuaries are studying, then they may not have the time required to actually build a society. And I would actually say the need to qualify is quite important. So I would rather that you focus the time and effort to do that, right? But of course, not to say that you can't do some things. But as I said, for me, it's about going on par with what you're doing in the industry. Like, and just to add to what Michael was saying, I also think one of the ways um, to represent the actual professional in the industry is to actually give services to solve industry problems. For example, one of the things I know we've done as task is to help them with the updating of mortality tables. So that's something they tend to outsource to actual consultants, maybe overseas. But then we say, okay, we can do this for you as a society, and that can be an interaction. So depending on what the current industry problem is, at some point we did minimum rates for the motor portfolio, which was struggling because it was quite loss making. So I would say that's also something else to think about. In terms of how we can support you from the Actual Academy, I'm happy to also have just a chat with you on the site, just so that obviously in the interest of time in the next session, but it's definitely something we'll be able to collaborate on, Edwin. Thank you.
Yeah, and just to say, the Actuarial Society of South Africa at the moment doesn't offer the kind of service that the Academy is offering in terms of free tutorials, etc. So hence different bodies have their strengths and they have their interests and they have things that they put in place. And that is certainly something that one can engage with the Academy, Academy Mukami's Academy, to get those services, the tutorial services and so on. Michael would be working with the universities to get their universities accredited. That obviously would be a journey, but it's so important that the education at the university level is of high quality. And Michael favors that strategy because he's a product of that strategy. I'm a product of that strategy. In a sense, Edwin is a product of that strategy, although he had to get on the boat to go and get that benefit. So we don't want you to have to get on the boat to get it. Want you to be able to get it in your country, but there's a lot of work to get to that point. Michael, your response?
Yes, no, that's fine. I don't have much to add apart from saying some of the things you are asking. Like I said, Edwin, we will need to engage with you, your committee. Those are some of the things I'll probably be providing guidance on. We'll probably even be talking to Mukami so that we can see what the academy can be able to do. One last point is that, you do not have to reinvent the wheel. Do not. There is a whole lot of stuff out there. It's copy and paste, or just saying, produce one page that says, we are going to follow so and that's it, and they just adapt it because things are there. And what we're going to do, I've already spoken to lecturers in Zambia, lecturers in Zimbabwe. We are going to try and see, and it's a university decision. It's a lot of work, like Lusani said, but try and encourage them to harmonize their actuarial programs. So for example, in Zimbabwe, there are 2 universities offering. A national university is the one that started with it in the 90s, and the other one only introduced 3 years ago. What is happening? They are harmonizing the exams. They are now trying to do things together. In South Africa, the same thing. We have got different universities, but some work together, like UCT and Stellenbosch work together. So we're trying to say, if Malawi is at the start, let's see what you're doing. Let's harmonize. Why don't you work together with Zambia, the lecturers there have visiting lecturers, and Zimbabwe National University of Science and Technology, and Tanzania, because Tanzania also has those universities. These are things I'm likely to bring, not impose, but bring in discussions and say, think about it, because you move much faster. No need to reinvent the wheel. That's the point I wanted to make, Lusani.
Fantastic. Look, there's a lot of ground to cover, and Edwin, you will have to organize other sessions with different people so that they can spend even more time. But I think we wanted your students and all the working students as well to get a taste of the level of discussion here. And to take that further, I think we can go into the next session where they're going to get a bit more technical, talking about Ifrs 17 and 9. And then hopefully there'll be some time left for some questions right at the end. So without wasting any more time, I want to hand over to Michael and Tafazo. Take it away.
Yeah, Lusani, thanks. I'm going to leave. Tafazo is going to lead this, but let me send a nice, interesting warning statement. So, when these sessions like this technical one were being done, when we were young and not yet knowledgeable, trust me, they were boring. We would come out of the session without understanding half the stuff. So, yet it was so simple, but we just couldn't get it. We just couldn't understand it because of the way it was pitched. So you will find that a lot. Some of the stuff might appear boring because you're not getting half the stuff, depending at the level, especially if you're at university. So watch out for that. Take it, there's internet these days. After that, go and search Ifrs 17, what is it? Ifrs 9, what is the story? Just read up on it. Then in our time, there would be 2 or 3 computers in a department. There was no internet or anything. So please take it as it comes. I will leave it to Tafazo to lead this. Tafazo himself has worked with me on Ifrs 9 and now he's rolling out Ifrs 17, quite technically competent in those areas. He's actually practicing it. I am practicing it too, Ifrs 9 and Ifrs 17, but let him dish it out, and then let's have if there's a 5-minute discussion at the end, that would be great. So Tafazwa, over to you. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much, Mike, and thank you so much, Lusani, and everyone for the insightful discussions. So just looking at our time, I'm also going to try and, shrink some of my presentations to be a bit more concise to try and help with the course there. So I will start off with Ifrs 17.
Are you able to share?
Yes, I'm sharing my screen just now.
Okay, it's coming.
Yes. Kindly confirm when you are now able to see.
We can see it. You can just take it on slide mode.
Okay, yes, that's fine. Is it better now?
Yeah, fantastic.
Okay, yes, thank you so much. And thank you so much for all making it. So Ifrs 17, this is a new standard coming. So this is what I thought we could look at today. Just a bit of an understanding. I do appreciate some of the members here present already. Some are already maybe being involved directly. Some have read about it. Some have heard about it. Some have attended other sessions before. So we will try and accommodate that. Then I will just try to cover one of the default approaches that's recommended by this standard. Then we look at accounts and then practical aspects to do with the standard. So in terms of overview, this standard, it is a new incoming standard. So by way of timelines, there is an intention to have it being effective from the 1st of January 2023. So already we are in 2021, so most entities are quite seized with the matter. So it's coming in primarily to try and replace some components and improve on some components of Ifrs 4, which used to be a reporting standard that's used. So if you ask about Ifrs 17, what is it about? It's mainly to do with how we account for insurance contracts within the financials of an entity. So to try and shed more light on that, by way of background, what has been recognized globally is that sometimes the financial statements of an insurer are difficult to really comprehend and interpret, especially for stakeholders such as investors, and to be able to compare like. So this standard primarily is coming in to enhance on that. So in terms of recognition, disclosure, measurement, presentation. So that would allow to say an entity in Asia, or investor in Asia, if they're coming to say investing in Malawi and they see a particular set of accounts, they're able to interpret them using the same yardstick. So basically that's what it is about. So this is the why part. In terms of the standard, you could expand on other benefits that comes with it, getting deeper into the technical components, but I would not want to get into that for now. And then, so as a standard, what it does is it's proposing 3 measurement models to account for those insurance contracts. So there is the general measurement model, which is the default approach, which is where they started off from. And then variations were then created or modifications to come up with the variable fee approach and the premium allocation approach. So these, you could view them as lighter versions of the general measurement model, try and accommodate, certain type of contracts that could have simplifications with them. So I'll just give an example to say, for general insurers who tend to write their business on an annual basis, they tend to, there is a lighter version through the premium allocation approach because their contracts are shorter by nature. But if you look at a life company maybe writing whole life insurance, they may fall the other end of the spectrum, use the general measurement model, which sort of tracks the performance of the contract. I'm going to illustrate this in a moment. So the default, in as much as you may also want to maybe skip through some of the aspects, I'll just try to explain the default approach, which is the general measurement model in a simplified way as far as possible. So when we say we enter into a new contract, we have to set up the following. So number one, there are going to be inflows, which we are already familiar with. These are premiums. Then we look at potential outflows. So this is a contract we are sort of rolling out or spreading across. So there are going to be naturally outflows, your expenses, your claims. Then there's going to be an element of discounting. So we're looking at a 20-year period. We need to be discounting any of these expected components. Then there comes an element of a risk adjustment. This risk adjustment now caters for those key risks around these contracts or a group of contracts. Here we are looking at, say, the risk of lapse, the risk expenses being higher than what we initially anticipated. And then we have to allow for that through a risk adjustment. When you combine all these 4 components, you come up with what they are referring to as fulfillment cash flows. Sorry, there's a missing letter there. But what's now left after you've grouped these is what we are referring to as the contractual service margin. So the contractual service margin, within it is either we are now saying there is a profit element we are anticipating, or there is a potential loss element that we are actually looking at. And then this standard on its own, what it's now encouraging us to do is not to recognize the entire contractual service margin, but it's in the immediate financial year or at the start, but rather we have to spread that component across the entire duration of the contract and recognize it as it comes along, taking into account any potential fluctuations that could be happening because of the changes in the business environment, for example, lapses could go higher or lower, we could realize more profit or lower profit as we get along the way. So in a way, this is the general measurement approach. And everyone is to start from this point and then justify to say, if we are not going to use this, if you're going to use the variable fee approach, this is our justification. It has got its own demands, but we sort of simplify. Then if you're going to use the premium allocation approach, it has also its demands. So I won't be getting into those details. That could be for a separate discussion. Our time may not allow. So in the way of accounts, what would then come in as a major difference to then allow, you can read about it, to say what are the key changes that are going to be happening to the financials. But in a nutshell, I would say that line in blue, which is written change in insurance contract liability under Ifrs 4, is going to be one of the major changes when you then carry out a component. So instead of us looking at what we used to do before to say we are more interested in the change in terms of profitability for a group of contracts as new contracts come in and others move out, etc. This is going to be replaced by a build-up that looks at profit elements or the CSMs for each and every group of contracts that you could be having, which then makes up what you're going to be defining as replacing that change in insurance contract liability. So this is over the entire period. Then there are these other disclosure elements, if for some of you may be familiar, I would say Ifrs 7 itself, this sort of speaks more to enhancement around disclosing more on how we have arrived at our several components of the financials. ETC, you're going to have to explain significant judgments that come in there, the nature of extent of risk. So we're going to be having enhanced set of accounts. And the purpose for that is just to equip the users or the consumers of the financial statement with more information that could allow them to be able to make a more informed decision. So if you look at the moment and compare with what you already have maybe in the market, you'll notice that different entities were presenting their financials in different ways, disclosing notes in different ways. Some would be more elaborative, some would be, just looking at things at a high level, but this standard is sort of asking entities to be more elaborate around that. Then comes the practical aspects now. Now, when we come to a market such as Malawi, if I look at Malawi, I think it's in a developing phase. It's not too different from markets such as Kenya, Zimbabwe, Tanzania, and the other regional markets. Certainly, there are certain common challenges that will come with this standard if it's to be rolled out on the ground. So first and foremost is to do with your IT. If you look at your IT and systems, this is going to be a demanding area. There's going to be need to check the current systems, their compatibility, the ability to have historical information that supports the build up of the several modules, having to separate out contracts on its own, it's going to be quite demanding. And then the issues to do with storage space and all of that. Then if you look at other issues that are going to be coming in, you could look at reporting templates having to be changed. You may want to look at skills upgrading, people getting training, people having to come up with even aspects to do with discounting assumptions. This may not have been there, or the regulators may have been developing something along those lines, but it's certainly going to be a challenging area. If you compare, say, with the markets such as South Africa, which had maybe solvency assessment management or European counterparts with Solvency II, they had certain aspects which are already close to this, but so they are going to have to be working more on enhancement. Then there's going to be cost of implementation to change. Certain entities are going to have to come up with actuarial divisions, having to resource up, having to change certain governance structures, having to invest directly in the cost of consulting, in the cost of maybe acquiring new systems, etc. around this. Then when you then look at these different components, what we did is then to just try and rank them. say in terms of implementation effort. So we believe the problematic areas are probably going to be around data and grouping of contracts, defining what those contracts are, what do you call a contract boundary. So I'll give you an example. So if an entity enters into a GLA contract, but they then guarantees that GLA premium won't be changed, say for the next 4 years. You know, it's an annual contract, but are you going to be saying it's an annual contract, but with a guarantee for 4 years? So when you look at this standard, essentially it could end up asking you to look at it as a 4-year contract instead. Use the general measurement model instead of the premium allocation model. So that has got to be looked at. Issues of onerous contracts, these are contracts that could be not performing from the start, expected to be making losses. These are supposed to be looked at separately and not necessarily being cross diversified or you know, with other profitable contracts. So they've got to be shown separately. You know, so these areas are going to be a bit more demanding. So if you look at issues to do with best estimates, this could be lighter. These are areas that could come in with other judgmental elements, already if there are actuaries who are carrying out the work maybe from South Africa, maybe from other countries, you know, assisting. It's an area they could already be familiar with. It may not be bringing a lot of changes, but certainly it needs to be aligned. Then the issues to do with risk adjustments.
Hello.
Hello.
Can everyone hear Tafazo?
No.
No, it
Okay.
seems like he's having internet problems.
Yeah, okay. We would have lost him there. Okay, let's see. Let's hope you come back. I hope you know. Someone, I don't know how to send him a message. But anyway, look, so until he comes back. So from, yeah, he's gone off. So from Tafazwa's presentation, effectively, one thing to illustrate, so he was now talking about practical issues. So one issue to illustrate here is, so there are technical issues that have been introduced that come with Ifrs 17. And they are quite complex. And if you look at it, a lot of them involve data issues. You know, the data for most companies not being in one place, maybe one is in an actuarial system, the other is in the finance or accounting system, and the other is in an admin system. So there is that element. And you know how it is, garbage in, garbage out. Then there is the technical element of choosing the models themselves that needs to be used, like the generalized measurement model, and then the premium allocation approach. And there's another one, third model, called the variable fee model. And all of those, you need to do some assessment in order for you to then say which is the most appropriate model. So these are issues that are of actuarial relevant. And some of you were asking earlier, so how do we show value? This Ifrs 17 is a very good example of that. And it is also an example of, you know, whatever earlier subjects you're doing, there's a lot of discounting there. There's a lot of assumption setting and justifying the assumptions. There's a lot of choosing which model and applying it correctly, and probably even having to develop that model. There's a lot of grouping contracts into different cohorts, you know, of contracts. So these are actuarial issues. And these are the issues some of you were talking about when you say, how do we show value? It's things like this. So this is actual practical issue. I think Tafazwa has come back, but I wanted to fill in the gap to say, so this is quite an interesting or a nice presentation to show you, especially those of you at university, application of actuarial concepts or application of the things we are doing, where you're looking at insurance contracts where premiums have been calculated, claims have been paid, there's an unearned premium reserve, it can be recognized immediately. How do you account for it? How do you project forward and discount back? All these things. So these are the actuarial elements that actuaries are faced with in the industry. I think Tafazwa can now complete on Ifrs 9. All we're going to do is we just tell you high level for 5 or 10 minutes and just show you where actuarial application is, or the concepts of where actuaries are actually getting involved. So we're not going to go into detail on it, but let Tafazwa finish on Ifrs 17.
Okay, thank you so much. I was almost done. Sorry for that. I think my connectivity is unstable there. I was almost done. We will be able to share these slides, I think, at the end, so that they are distributed and others who may want to read further. So this was the end of it. Let me share the one for Ifrs 9. Then I would just in just about 5 minutes, like what Mike said, I'll just try to wrap up on it as well.
Yeah. Then we can have questions. Yeah. Then we can have question discussion for the last 10 or so minutes.
Yes. So in terms of Ifrs 9, what I will also share these, but I just wanted to let me just rush to a part. So these are areas where actuaries could actually add value, you know, in a banking setting. You are going to have this to study, but Ifrs 9 has already been effective since the 1st of January 2018, and some of you may be familiar with it already. It just looks at the grouping of loans. You know, when you look at loans, I'm sure we are all familiar with the loan schedule that spreads the loans, but this standard essentially now asks an entity or a banking institution, a deposit-taking institution, to estimate expected credit losses. That essentially looks at that similar concepts of a lifetime distribution, to say from the inception of the facility or the loan right up to where it ends. So you could sort of see a mirror there with what Ifrs 17 is also trying to do, but this is now happening on loans. Now, when I talk of the concept of a loan amortization schedule, it sort of brings it out in a more clear way, and we can all relate. Now, what you are just seeing before you there is to say, throughout the tenure or the period of a loan, there are going to be defaults and non-defaults, and we are going to be having a probability being attached, say per year, you know, to look at the likelihood of default occurring and the survival of the loan being serviced until it gets to the end. And that's rolled back through discounting to come up with a possible likelihood of what we're estimating. So I'm just giving this at a high level detail, but it gets deeper. There's then the separation of probability of default. There's discounting, like what that formula is showing there. There's loan given default, there's exposure default, there's probability of default. It's all combined together. And magically, when you compare it to this formula, which we are all familiar with from an actuarial setting, you can see that this is more of your typical term assurance. So the components of that ECO formula, when you compare it to your typical product from a life, you could actually see that it resembles the same concepts. Hence, actuaries could actually take on this with easy way of understanding it and being able to apply it. So this is just a live example, but obviously when you then look at the products, they tend to, you know, to vary, and then you're going to be tweaking around a few aspects. So I won't be getting into this in terms of how you carry out the modeling, but to just emphasize to say, if you look under probability of default there, you could see those methods there, which we are already familiar with: logistic regression, survival analysis, Merton type model. You know, you are looking at a basic chain ladder, Kaplan-Meier. You know, these are all things we are familiar with from our actuarial models, etc. So it's just to shade. So we are going to share this. Is just to, you know, give an example of what you may want to look at. Then in terms of software, you know, your typical softwares that we are already familiar with is actuaries. We tend to then apply those. It gets deeper than that, but typically that's what you want to apply. Then there are also practical issues, you know, just like with any standard, we are going to work with the size of the market. You're going to work with issues of judgment, issues of data, issues of macroeconomic challenges with the business environment, etc. So I would say this brings me to the end. Back to you, Mike and Tim, for a discussion. Hello?
Yeah, are you
Oh,
done?
sorry, I was talking, but no, I was saying, so you could see that Ifrs 9 on its own will require at least an hour of presentation to talk about all the issues. Ifrs 17 on itself would also require an hour. But what we did here is to bring these aspects or these two components, Ifrs 17 and Ifrs 9, and actually show you what actually are happening in practice and where actuaries are supposed to be involved. Ifrs 17, a bit familiar with actuaries because it's insurance, that's where we are used to be. Ifrs 9, it's banking, and a lot of jurisdictions are not familiar with actuaries working in banking. But you saw that Tafazwa showed you a formula there that actually shows you that there are similarities. So there is actually application of actuarial techniques in a banking environment, as you can see there. Survival models is what we use in Ifrs 9. Chain ladder model is what we use in Ifrs 9 to assess some of these aspects that are required to calculate expected credit losses. So I think with that, given that we don't have much time, let's get into questions and discussions. And I hand over to the chair, Lusani, maybe. I think there's Edwin there with a question, and if anyone else has questions as well.
Michael, you can chair this part, so
okay.
We can take the questions. Ne?
All right, no, that's fine. So in fact, so we have Edwin. Edwin, you can come in with your question, and anyone else can also ask questions regarding either Ifrs 9 or Ifrs 17. It doesn't matter how you ask.
Okay, thank you, Mike, and thank you, Tafaza, for the wonderful presentation. I know the time is limited, but my question has been partly answered by Michael in terms of what these standards mean to actuaries. Michael, you mentioned that this, on one hand, it can help us showcase to our employers what our skills bring on the table. On the other hand, I wanted to understand what is the major shift in terms of actuarial demand, or are there more actuarial opportunities? So I'm asking this on behalf of our students and on behalf of even us working in the industry, that these are accounting standards, but are they providing like more opportunities for actuaries? That's my first question. My second question is related to what you answered earlier, that we need to showcase our skills, for example, in these standards. And you have also mentioned about actuaries working in the banking. Now I'm thinking about banks here, like in Malawi. I'm wondering at what point will these banks realize that, okay, maybe we need our actuaries, or there are actuaries out there, or it's something that we actuaries have to do outside the banks for the banks to realize that we can also work in the banks. Thank you.
Okay, look, I will start, and then Tafazo can chip in answering your two questions, assuming I still have them in my head and I understood them well. The question on, let's start with the question on banks. Look, the work around the world, it's a developing area. It's mature in a few jurisdictions such as South Africa, Australia. Then we have got pockets, a few in the US and in the UK. In the US, look, that's a big country. We have got a lot of actuaries working in the banking types models, but on the credit side of things, but mainly from the Casualty Actuarial Society. So let's take Malawi, for example. It depends, I know that a Malawian bank bought a bank in Zimbabwe, the former Barclays was bought by a Malawian entity. It's probably already happening. It's probably a case that they already, let's say if they contract PwC or Deloitte to do this. If they do that, chances are in doing the work, actuaries are already involved because they are coming from outside. So there is potential that actuaries are already involved. But in South Africa, what you find is consulting companies. We also actually run a consulting company ourselves where we are actuaries and we're doing this. In South Africa, Deloitte, PwC, KPMG, they have got actuarial teams that specialize in this. And all the banks have had to understand it. and they have had to be employing actuaries to develop these models. Then the regulator has had to actually be using actuaries and say, actuaries must look at these things. So actuaries naturally then fit in. If you look at Zimbabwe, the same thing, the regulator now is aware that actuaries are involved. But this is an area where other people with statistical knowledge, like a PhD in statistics or masters, are also doing this same type of work. But actuaries bring a very different element, and we actually see it when we do validation of models for these banks. So we can help you with that. As we speak, as we develop the association, we can help you with views on trying to spread the message on how banks can actually tip into the skills of actuaries. Now that takes me right into as the demand increased as a result of these models. Look, it really depends on the company, the maturity of the actuarial profession. In most cases, the company, the consultants may effectively just use the skills they already have, because they already have people, actuaries doing the work, and those same actuaries can end up doing this. But we have seen banks employing actuaries, increasingly employing actuaries to do these models. So naturally that should, lead to demand for actuaries, but you know what, you cannot see that demand easily because it's not too big. I mean, probably 1 or 2 who has been employed. But as the work continues to be rolled out, naturally it should lead to demand. But if we come to Malawi side, 100%, it should, because already you're not having a lot of local Malawians being employed in these particular things. So naturally, as banks or as companies in the Malawi environment start to understand the role of actuaries in complex standards, accounting standards such as this, which these are not for accountants, trust me. Accountants, they are very good other accountants we encounter in the market, but ordinarily they are not trained to do some of the skills that are being required or that are required by these standards. So naturally, in a country like Malawi, it should naturally lead to demand for actuaries, I would like to say. But if the actuaries are being brought from outside, obviously you won't see the demand locally as well, because these companies might be assuming there is nobody here. Therefore, you bring from outside. So there is a demand, yes, or the demand might not be as large or visible, especially for established actuarial firms. It's just recruiting 2 additional people or 3. That's about it, Banks themselves, if they want someone internally, yes, that will naturally lead to demand for actuaries. I think that's my answer on your 2 questions. There is Muti here with his hand up, but I don't know if Tafazwa wants to add anything to the 2 questions that have been asked before Muti comes in. We've got how many?
Yes, just one. Yeah. Okay, just one additional element there, Mike, to say, I think as a society, you could sort of, a good starting point is to also liaise with, say, if there's a banking society of Malawi, and have that help in terms of setting the right tone, sharing in terms of capabilities, in terms of well, sometimes it's an issue of not being understood. To say, what is it that you stand for? What do actuaries do? There is that common element where, the rest of individuals believe actuaries are for pensions, they are for life valuations. In some markets, they do not even believe actuaries have got a say in healthcare, but here we have a testimony. If you look at like Lusani has worked in that market for quite a number of times. I've worked there, etc. So I believe it's an issue of the society taking it up, trying to make it, become more visible to the industry. That's just my addition. I think Mut can come in. Yes.
Thank you.
Hi,
yes,
I hope you can hear me. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can. Yeah, for now we can.
All right, great. So I'm just going to help answer Edwin's question. Sorry, Edwin, I probably should have reached out to you earlier because I am in a bank and I am sort of a hobbyist actuary, if you will. I have a statistics background and a whole lot of other letters after my name. But we do have a demand for actuaries. especially with Ifrs coming in. Some of the work we're also doing, which I'm involved in, for example, is making predictive models for default rates. Very exciting stuff. But it's a case of we don't know where the actuaries are. The bank is also banks are also not willing.
No, we are here. We are here.
Definitely. The other bigger challenge is, unlike an insurance company, we're not going to fund an actuarial study. So we're going to hope we can get a finished product, which isn't how it should work, but sadly that's just how it is. In terms of demand, I would say let's say the 5 biggest banks in Malawi, at least all of them should have one actuary starting point, especially as we move to Basel III and many other rigorous regulations coming into the sector. Thank you.
Okay, no, thank you, Muti. So I think, I think one of the things we obviously should be doing, especially at association level, remember at the end of the day is you want people to pass exams, you want then people to be employed, and you want people to be competent when they're employed. So I think that's one of the things we'll probably be talking about a lot. And that's why I would love a follow-up sessions. We can discuss these things. We make sure the association itself leads. Then you make sure that if companies locally are looking for actuaries but you don't know where actuaries are found, what would typically need to happen is if the association drives it, right? A lot of senior actuaries can train local actuarial skills. There is a lot of cross-pollination that can happen from South African actuaries, Zimbabwean actuaries, because they are the closest to you guys, and train even local people. Because some of these things, as long as people are brilliant, they've gone through their university stuff, and they can be trained to actually do these things. And then senior actuaries can always come and review, sign off, and do all the other stuff that needs to be done. So, but that's part and parcel of developing an actuarial association, so that you're not just there, but you're actually doing the work and providing solutions. Tafazo, I don't know if you want to add anything.
No, not at the moment.
Okay, right. Any other question on this? We have got about 2 minutes only. And if there is any other question, please ask us. Let me also go to the chat room. Do we have actuarial science application in healthcare or health system? Sorry for the question. Yes, you have. Actually, healthcare has been there for more than, is it 30 years? Maybe, I think 30 years or something. It's a health practice. In fact, health subject is one of the specializations in actuarial science. It started, it was a big thing. Actuarial Society of South Africa is probably one of the leaders. It developed around the world after Actuarial Society of South Africa was already practicing in actuarials in healthcare. Same as what happened in banking. It's now spreading around the world, but it started here in South Africa. So yeah, that's a nice one. Any other questions? Because we only have 1 minute, at least according to my phone. Okay, if there are no other questions on the technical aspect, I would like to hand over to Lusani. And in doing that, I would like to say, so there is need for active participation of the society and raising awareness of what actuaries can do. Some of us as senior actuaries, sometimes we wear too many hats. Sometimes we try and avoid conflict of interest when we are discussing professional issues, development issues, and the like. But when we hear someone in the audience saying, we don't know where the actuaries are, we are then forced to answer as well as say, there are a lot of them, and they want to help, and they want to make sure at a local level, the people there after university, they've got a rewarding job, and they are providing solution to the industry. That's why we exist as a profession. I hand over to you, President Lusani. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much for availing yourselves and doing these presentations. And to all the students who are still at university, I hope that you learned a lot today. And reach out to us through your leaders. We're here for you. We really want you to succeed in this career. Malawi is an exciting country. And we do want to see you succeeding. And the leadership, we say continue to lead, and we are definitely here to support you. Thank you very much for this, and I think we can declare this meeting closed. Thank you very much.
Yes, so thank you very much, Mr. President. Muti, Edwin, and everyone here, Mukami, Tafazwa, everyone, I think Hewitt, Banda, Precious, all of you, thank you very much. I hope to interact with you at the next level. Thank you.
Yes, we will. Thank you.
very
Have a
much.
good day.
Same to you.
Thank you.
And to all the Malawian Zulu people there.
and the Malawians who ran away from Shaka Zulu. People like
Yes.
He played that guy.
All right. Thanks, guys. Bye-bye. Cheers. Keep all.
Cheers.